Hi, everybody! Welcome to another amazing, fun ZBrush Masters. So, season 2 we are in right now. So, we're excited to have our Marco Plouffe here. He's done many presentations, even on the ZBrush Summit. He's done a lot of stuff. He's going to be sharing some pretty amazing hard surface techniques. He's one of the co-founders of the Chaos Masons. So he's going to be showing you guys some pretty great techniques. I know myself personally, I still get asked a lot about hard surface stuff. I actually recommend Marco's videos that he's done for us with the ZBrush Summit. So this is a great opportunity for you guys to see him working inside of ZBrush, how he goes about his approaches, and ask any questions you have. So Marco, thanks for being here with us.
It's my pleasure, Paul. Like I was saying, I'm going to be showing a few things related to hard surface. But like my journey with ZBrush brought me to learn so much more. So I just want everybody to feel welcome to ask like any kind of questions. I like to answer questions, so don't hesitate. And basically, like I'd rather like keep things like free form for the stream, but like I'm gonna be like somewhat like doing it in like 2 or 3 chapters because I want to show. Basically, I want to show 2 approaches for hard surface modeling. For those who saw my interrupted summit presentation, basically I'm gonna be like starting from there and going like a bit further. Basically the 2 techniques I'm going to be showing, I call them the quick one and the clean one, and it's they exist for many purposes. Basically, they exist for one, for making something like quick where you don't rely on like absolute quality, so you're actually going to go like faster, you're going to try to stay efficient. And the other one is where you actually need to bring like the notch like up, but at the at the consequence of like spending more time. So that being said, one of the things that I actually want to talk about also is efficiency, or at least like the overarching theme above that. The philosophical point, let's say, is going to be like efficiency. The reason why I like to talk about that is because often people ask me like how I do to work so fast. And my answer is always because I kind of like know where to spend time and where to not spend so much time. And I think it's actually like something that's like it's kind of hard to break the habit of like taking the time to do something super well, which is fine, absolutely fine. But it's also good to know like where to cut corners to actually get something done quickly, especially if you're going to work in the industry where like things are always on like a deadline. Sometimes it's good to actually like know how to be efficient and such. So this is also something like I might touch base on, or it might be just at the background, like in a philosophical way, basically. Also, like out of like the structure of the 2 method, there's also like a lot of like little tricks that I know that I want to share, because it's really hard to share those tricks if it's not like live or on the fly. So let's take the opportunity to do that, as well as taking the opportunity to answer questions. That would be my little introduction. Normally when I teach or I do a workshop, I always start by like asking people if they have questions. But I guess maybe it's better we jump, like Paul,
Yeah.
Is it better we just jump in the subject, or
Sure, we can go in, and then for everybody, obviously the chat I'll be monitoring. So as questions come through, I'll answer what I can in text form for you all, and then I'll be storing questions to throw at Marco in the opportune times. So just keep your questions coming through when you have, and we'll find the moments. Like Marco said, he's got his presentation broke down kind of in 3 sections. So we'll find moments when we can throw questions at him, but we want him also to get in a groove of showing the stuff he wants to show for you guys as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're gonna switch, and you guys are gonna see now Marco's full glory of ZBrush, and still his little webcam here. All right, so Marco, I'll let you take it away from here, and I'll be monitoring the chat with the questions coming through and throwing them at you when I need to throw them at you.
Yep, that's cool. That's cool. All right, so I think I'll be revolving around two models, especially. I have like much more models that I can load. Anything that like a client has given me permission or anything that's personal, I can always bring it up if like you guys have questions and whatnot. But I find that these two models basically like show a lot of the most of like the techniques that I use. During the presentation at the ZBrush Summit, I was showing this model that I made for Sideshow. So this is like the head of Sentinel, and it was made to be like broken in pieces. So like ironically, like nobody ever saw it like this except for my 3D renders, because they were always all like busted. Actually, I have a screenshot here. Like this is, for example, like something that the Sentinel head was used to actually do, like this base here, which is completely destroyed. It's kind of funny. This is a sculpt by Will Harbottle, by the way. I'm pretty sure. I hope. Jesus Christ, if I made a mistake with the name. Anyways, so it's kind of funny to see that like it was like all pristine first, and maybe some of you might say like, oh well, that was maybe like useless. But the idea is that like a head like this with my technique, like if I don't hit any walls, which I don't often, I can basically like do like a head like this, and when I rush, probably like 3-4 days, just because of like the technique. I'm so used to it. Plus putting like the efforts at the right place, also knowing what's the purpose for this head later. So this is something that I made just to show like quickly how it's been constructed. It's been constructed in 3 pieces. Well, first of all, it was a blocking, which I'm going to show later. But technically, there's like one centerpiece here that's like just a bunch of like nothing. It's just like visual noise for in between the cracks. And there's like the floaters that are on top. The floaters are basically the plates. Some plates that are made like this, and some other piece that you can say maybe they're more like a block, like these here. Sometimes also like some stuff that are more like procedurally done, like this earpiece, or like stuff like that, like IMMs and that sort of stuff. Like pieces like this, like the ear, it's going to be more like ZModeler, because anything that's made out of like a primitive shape, that's going to stay a primitive shape. Most of the time, I'm probably going to use ZModeler for that. But the moment that I go into my organic shapes, this is where I actually start to model with the brush and use the other techniques that are less polymodeling, let's call it. So like the blocks like this, those are pieces that are more or less done with like a DynaMesh technique, no real like technical approaches. And plates like these are going to be approached more like in a technical way. So like the panel loop, the dynamic subdivision decreases, a bit of ZModeler, et cetera, and some other tricks I'm going to be showing. So that's the overall idea, is like, how do you do like pieces like this? How do you do pieces like this? Why? And also to know that like some areas like this one here, there was no reason for me to actually like do anything really clean. It's just a matter of having a centerpiece, especially because it's going to be printed, and you kind of like need to have like something that's watertight at some point. This is very relating to the print, the collectible industry though, but it's a practice that I've always done. So if I look at like another model, like this one, it's basically going to be the same thing once again. Like pieces like this are going to be made with like panel loops and such. The approach is going to be more like going clean and stuff, doing the whole like panel loop technique and whatnot. And sometimes like pieces like this here are going to be simply like modeled. So you see it's like pretty sketch when you look at it up close, but it's never going to really be shown up close. So why do something that would take more time, right? Yeah, even like the neck, almost the entire neck is like one piece. This is not really hard surface though, but whatever. It's maybe worth to say that this is like maybe an area that I'm going to be spending less time, to make sure that like the focus area, I spend most of the time on them, especially if I have a limited time. This is going to be like another plate. I think like for this guy, I knew that I was going to do like face close-ups, so I actually made it very very intricate, even like for just like some head details. But that was the purpose. That was the focus. I knew I was going to go there, so that's why I spent a lot of time. All right. So yeah, let's just go and talk about like how to approach a model with my two techniques. For that, I'm going to be using this model here. Oops. So the Sentinel. But I'm just going to show you real quick. Like that was the blocking of it. So this is the high res. This is the blocking here. And this blocking here is basically done almost in one piece, except for the thing that are floating here. All right. So a lot of people often ask me, like, how do I do everything in one piece? And it's basically like this is like the one piece, except for I cut some things here. Anyways, whatever. And the answer is basically just like I've practiced so much controlling my brushes, so I've like gained like a certain dexterity that lets me like take like one shape it, and like process it so it reads as like hard surface, even like if it's just a blocking or something. So this is just a question of like time and practice, of course, but I'll show you like my approach. I'm not going to show you necessarily like how I design and that sort of stuff. This is not something I feel particularly adept at, or at least to the point where I'm not sure if I can explain it well. But like I will often start from a sphere that's going to be a DynaMesh. Oops. So just a simple DynaMesh. You go in symmetry, and basically you would sculpt like any way you want. But the idea here that I want to actually to convey is that when I actually model for hard surface, I don't really put myself in a mindset of doing hard surface necessarily at the beginning. It's very important that I approach the model with less constraint. So what I do is I really like to just think about like the shape first and whatnot. Like this, let's say like I'm starting to do like a human head, like this would be like where I would start creating the shape and such. And at some point, I'm going to be maybe applying some like visual language that shows that this piece is a hard surface. And by visual language, I mean like the moment you see like a surface is clean, it's like it's a visual language used for hard surface. The moment you put little bolts and stuff, this is like a visual language that's used to express hard surface. So the point is that hard surface is not necessarily a technique, it's more like a result. So anything you do, if it reads as hard surface, well, you've done hard surface. It's not hard surface because you use the panel loops in ZBrush and whatnot. It's just the way to get there, right? So this is really important to keep in mind. Cedric is really good at actually doing organic shapes that transforms into hard surface. That's what he showed in his presentation at the ZBrush Summit. It was basically like a shape that transforms into like many through like process changes into like many like results, like one that is really organic, one that is hard surface, one that is like organic hard surface, whatever. The point is that you approach it organically, and when it's time to give it like some like hard surface treatment, one technique that I like to use is like, for example, let's say that I would let's say that this shape here was flat. So like right now I'm just really like crudely flattening the shape. Okay, let's say that like this, the top of like the cranium here is round. Okay, let's say you want it to have like a ledge or something like that, something that's going to be like a silhouette break that has like somewhat of like a hard surface feel to it. There's like an approach that I find that goes really well, is to break down your process into first you do the mass, and then you do the edges, and then you do the planes. So for example, if you look at this piece over here, well, the mass is basically just like the volume of itself. Then the edges are, of course, these two lines here, and the planes will be like, for example, those are three planes. Plane number 1, plane number 2, plane number 3, and there's like a plane number 4 here, let's say. So it's really important to think this way, and this is like the actual process of it will be to, first of all, adding mass. So there was like a ledge here, so I'm just gonna like be adding like some mass here.
So what are your go-to brushes that you like to use when you're doing the hard surface?
The brushes is it's actually yeah. If I actually just look at like here, those are basically like the brushes that I use the most. And to be honest, maybe like the first 5 is the one that I will always like go to. This is a standard brush, which I actually don't really use that much, to be honest. It's more like the clay brush to create the mass of things, like I'm doing right now. Dam standard and orb crack that I will use to do either cavities or edges. And the move brush, of course, I use it often just to move my pieces around. But for example, right now I'm creating mass, and the mass, once I actually like added it, I will just smooth it out like this. And you see I'm already basically like creating like, well, my planes. The second thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm gonna actually insist on adding the edges. So by using dam standard, you see like dam standard normally does like a cavity like this, but if you actually use it with Alt, it does like this like peak thing here. And this way I kind of like insist on having my edge right here. And it's kind of important to really insist on having your edges, because a lot of time in my process I'll be smoothing, and it's going to be important that like after I'm done smoothing, I keep the intention of like that edge. So I'm going to be maybe insisting here. I could even like insist on like the cavity here, like this. And after that, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to concentrate on the planes. So I did the mass, I did the edges, now I do the plane. And I like to use smooth stronger. It's just smooth, but stronger. And like I'm going to basically be doing something that I could do with H polish, but at a stage of blocking like this, I kind of like I like to use smooth, because it kind of like gives like a melty effect that I actually enjoy. So if I'm going to undo what I did, I'm just going to show what it does from the side view. It's like you kind of see like that by giving the treatment, I kind of like flatten this edge right here. So I'm just going to go back again. So you see now it's like squiggly, but by like softening it with smooth, I actually pretty much get my plane already polished. Now there's just like this little dip here, and you can basically just like smooth, but making sure that the radius of your smooth brush never touches your edge in case you don't want to lose your edge. So you see like I kind of like got rid of it. And if you really need to insist even more so that the readability is like even more than that, then you can use something like H polish, for example. Maybe a question would be like, why would you stay like this at this point? It's because maybe for a blocking, this is good enough so that like an artistic director can read this as art surface. So why go more than that if it's like for a blocking or just like conveying an idea, right? Like this is not the thing we're going to bake, so it doesn't matter if you spend more time. I mean, in my opinion. But like if you do spend more time and you want it to be like your polished result, the one you're going to bake, so your high res, maybe you're going to want to actually spend more time with like H polish and polish this. Now with H polish, it's going to be important to take in consideration that I'm often going to use H polish with the Alt button pressed and without the Alt button pressed. And what's the difference? It's just basically in which direction that the mass is flattening. So is it like, let's say like this is like the middle here, and your mass is kind of like in the middle, but it's not straight. Let's say you use H polish, it's gonna like straighten it, but going lower. And if you actually use alt, it's gonna straighten it, but going like higher, for example. And I realized that, for example, if you use it without alt in that angle here, oops, you're gonna start to affect like the surface here that was beside it. Like we don't want to affect here, we just want to affect this like plane here. So to not affect it like this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use alt. I'm going to make sure that the radius of my H polish is somewhat the size of the thing, like this. So now you see that it's kind of like adding mass and it's not digging on the level. It's right here. Yes, it did some like nasty stuff on the top here, but because this is like the most like the higher point, it's just a matter of cleaning this part afterwards. And yeah, if you bust up like this part, you can just go back on it and do a couple of like strokes like this, and etc., etc. So this would be basically like the approach that I'm going to be using to create those like this like visual language of hard surface, even if I'm working on like a blocking, or if I'm working maybe in an organic sculpty approach. This is how I actually do. So yeah, that's so basically like in a nutshell, this what I just explained is like the maneuver that you're going to be using over and over and over and over and over and over again. So of course, there's like a lot of things I can add in there so that actually I get to like a better polished product. But this is basically the rinse and repeat thing that I'm going to be using. That's like the dexterity. Did you see any questions so far, Paul?
Yeah, let me wrap a couple questions up together that relate to what you're talking about. So you started in DynaMesh. Do you ever use Tessimate at all, or are you only beginning process you're working in DynaMesh?
I actually only use DynaMesh. I'm just so happy of the way it actually works already. And I kind of like the consistency of DynaMesh because everything is always at the same resolution, and it kind of like works for me. Yeah, I have nothing against Tessellate. It's actually pretty cool, but it's easier. It was easier for me to just keep using like the same approach I've been using. Sometimes I will use Tessellate when I have to correct a decimated mesh. So something, let's say I decimated to be printed later, and I realize that like my ready to print product is like there's something that's like wrong, and the decimation is like there's not enough resolution in like this area to really like add the thing I need to add. I might actually use Sculptress, that sort of stuff, to just like get that detail in or like remove something.
And then for your when you're DynaMeshing, what is your resolution usually set at? Like for this model, what's your resolution set at? Do you stay kind of within that resolution?
Okay, this one is, right now that's like 500, but like it's always relating to the scale. And this one is like a weird scale. The scale of this model is weird because I've been using a base mesh that is like not really within like the units that like ZBrush appreciate. But maybe if I look at the other one here, this one here, the resolution is 3000, and it's basically, I think this one is more like in the standard resolution, I guess. I think that the point is more like, why would I go lower or higher? And my idea is that I always try to be as low as possible in resolution within the needs. Right now, for like this head right now, the needs are not to be polished. They're just to actually read from like this distance. Ooh, he has hands too. Anyways, like it's supposed to be read from like a full body, like from head to toe on the screen. Nothing needs to be more precise than that. I'm just trying at this point to sell a design, and I don't believe that it needs to be like more than that. At least if like the result of, not the result, but the scope of the goal of the character is to be seen from that distance most of the time. If you need to do like, if you know that this character will be a talking head, maybe like you're gonna, I'm gonna like subdivide or use a higher level of DynaMesh. But my idea is that I always try to stay as low as possible so that I get the least big, like the smallest ZBrush files, just to help for maybe like transfer to clients and that sort of stuff. Or myself, I hate when a project is lagging, so I'm actually going to try to really keep the things like as low as possible. And this way, I don't need to break my character into many pieces in many Z tool. I can pretty much have my entire character in one Z tool, just because I've been economic, let's say.
And then when you're done your DynaMesh, do you transition out of DynaMesh into like subdivision levels, or are you just pretty much stay in the DynaMesh mode for yourself?
Hell yeah, I'll be showing that later. That's pretty much like the next thing I'll be jumping at. But I'm going to sometimes I'm going to keep things in DynaMesh because it's just like it's fine. Like the illusion is there. We don't need to be like more polished or whatnot. But sometimes what I like to do is I like to ZRemesh my models just so that it actually works on a subdivision level base. And the reason why I like to do that is because it's kind of easier to move around your character when you're using subdivision levels, because it can compress your model into its lowest subdivision level while moving and that sort of stuff. Once again, it's just because I like when things are like moving smoothly and stuff. Yeah, it's the same reason why I will often use like dynamic subdivisions also for models that don't really need to actually have, like you don't need to sculpt on them. It's just a matter of like using the creases and stuff. This is something I'll show again later. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, just a quick one that you can answer, and then you can move on to your next thing. How long have you been using ZBrush, and how long have you been in like the 3D artists?
Okay. I've been using ZBrush since 3.1. That was in 2019, 2010. That's when I went to school for 3D. And in the moment I actually started to use ZBrush, it was kind of like an answer from the gods, because I remember like doing like in my character art classes, character modeling classes, I used to just use 3ds Max and try to do like hair strands on the beard just by modeling like diamond shape and like cutting like bevels so that it actually stays creased, right? And like when they showed ZBrush, I was like, oh, thank God, this is like the thing I needed, because I'm not necessarily like good at drawing. I mean, I'm okay, it's fine. I just never had really any academic training for it, but I've always drawn. Since I was a kid, I've always had like a pen in my fingers and in my hand, and just like drawing and drawing. So it really comes natural to me, the approach of like doing it by hand. So this is why when I actually started to use ZBrush, it was like, oh yeah, that's so good. And this is also the reason why when since I like to do robots, the moment that like I saw like people like Furio or Cedric do hard surface things in ZBrush, and I was like, oh, it's possible and it's great. And then I was fortunate enough to have Cedric show me, and then I was fortunate enough to have ZBrush create some more hard surface inclined tools. Then for me, I was like, that's perfect, because I can still sculpt, do my art like organic approach to modeling, but I have now the tools to transform it into hard surface things. So since 2009, 2010, I've used ZBrush. So that means like 10 years now. Yeah,
11 years. 10 years.
10 years that I know 3D, and yeah, was that?
Yeah.
There was a second sub questions.
Oh, now I'd say move on to your next part, and then that'll answer some of the questions too that are coming up.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, so I'll be just in the sake of like staying in the same lane as the presentation, I'll be showing that little like piece here, this little guy here. I'll be showing like how I approach to actually make this thing clean now that I made the blocking of it. Basically, I'm going to show you how to make it look polished. So yeah, first of all, everything you see here, I've done it with the exact technique that I showed you with the top of the head of the other character. So the creating the mass, doing the edges, and then flattening the planes. Like everything in this character here has been done this way. For parts that like I separated, I might have used also some clip curve, like why not, right? When you have like a silhouette and you want to really like have like those edges, using the clip curve is like more than welcome. Boom, clip curve that is basically using Control and Shift, and it's going to give you, at first it's going to give you a selection tool, but you can just transform it into a clip curve here, and you can see flatten your silhouettes like this. So basically, yeah, like I said, it's just like using the tools that I just showed you, but at the same time, maybe adding clip curve or whatnot. Okay, so now I have this. Basically, I sculpted my blocking, and I'm going to be polishing it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a duplicate of my model here, so that I always have this one in backup. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into isolation. I'm going to select only this part. I can hide it easily because it's a poly group. And I'm going to delete hidden everything else. So now in my subtool, it's only that I have. Delete hidden is in modify topology, geometry, modify topology, delete hidden, somewhere in here. Me, I have shortcuts on my keyboard. Also, yeah, good thing to know. I use almost only shortcuts and like my tools here, or my custom menus that I created that has like my quick tools. I almost never go in like here or on top here. So anyway, so I have this. I delete hidden. Now this piece is isolated. I can even like work on only half of it, so it goes like faster. I'm gonna like mirror and weld it to the other side later. But so far, like this, the first thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to get rid of everything that could be in my way. So by that, I mean like all the little like details here, like this cavity, this alpha that's here. I don't want this in my way. I basically want to go back to a simpler shape. So any technique is fine. I don't really have a particular technique, but it can be as simple as just like using the clay brush like this and just filling the holes. And yep, this. So basically, once I got rid of those, I call them mid details. Once I got rid of the mid details, at this point, I'll basically just like try to get rid of like the brush strokes, just like the smooth technique. Like I said, it's a matter of just having the radius at the right size, so you don't hit like the edges and make them disappear like this. You just want to keep some remnants of like your edges. You can even use like H polish. They were basically doing the same thing. I'm just trying to like clean my planes, but yeah, any technique is fine, I guess. But me, it's smooth brush and H polish. At this point, I'm probably gonna like use DynaMesh again, just to like maybe reset some pinching in the topology that could just like influence my brush strokes. And I'm gonna clean the backside, just so it's a bit cleaner. I'm never really gonna show the backside of this piece, so there's no reason for me to really like make it like so clean, but I just want to have like something that's like decent. So I'm just gonna like create some yeah. Let's give it a shot like this. How does it look on the other side? Oh, you see it's kind of well cut. All right, this. All right. So now the shape itself is pretty clean. To start doing the process itself, maybe this could be a little bit flatter like this. All right. So let's say that this is clean enough. I'm gonna give a little DynaMesh, and from this here, this is where I actually might do a ZRemesh to just get it to like a subdividable model. I could go like further with the DynaMesh and decide to do the Z remesh later. Because at the end of the day, I can always like use project all to just get back the shape. But basically, I know that like at this point, the shape is not going to really change. Like the design is there. That's the shape I'm going for. So yeah, I can commit probably to using subdivision levels. And you know what? At the end of the day, it doesn't even matter because I can always just decide to erase my subdivision levels, go back to DynaMesh, and do again a Z remesh and another project all. It's really like you're not that like much of a slave of like the technicalities with my technique. You can pretty much just jump from one to the other. I'd say it's more in the other approach, the clean approach. That's like sometimes you're going to hit stuff that are more like points of no return in quotes, even if there's like a couple of techniques that I learned, but whatever. Anyways, from that here, let's say I'm going to go with Z remesh. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to clone this into its own Z tool so that it's alone in the scene. I'm going to do a duplicate. Sorry. And then I'm going to Z remesh this. Z remesh is normally in geometry, Z remesh, and that's it. But here I have it in my quick tools. And the other option, the only really option that I use, at least for the moment, is the target polygon count. So this is like in thousands. So if I let it at 4, it's 4,000 polys. It's going to aim for. I know I can be like much lower than that. So I'm going to go for like 0.3, which is 300. It's probably going to give me more, but it's just like a ballpark like number. Like you see, like this is like low enough. This is good. I mean, it's going to help me to navigate in my scene. So I'm going to go with that shape here. The one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to check if there's no like holes. Sometimes, very rarely, Z remesh is going to actually leave like a hole in there. So like I try to just like make sure that it's like taken care of early. And if there's a hole, it's really easy. You just go in like modify topology, close hole. I think it's there.
Yeah, you're right. It is.
Close hole right there. And me, it's in my little thing here, close hole. You see right next to Z remesh because that's one of the reasons why I use it. You just hit close hole, and you can just make sure it's all on the same poly group again by clicking Control W, and that's it. So now this, I just need to reproject it. So on this shape here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subdivide, let's say 2 times. Then project is here. But I'm going to be using, like, for example, the only thing I'm going to be using is the projection shell, distance, and project all. So projection shell is basically telling him how far you need to go to calculate where you need to snap. It just helps for the algorithm, I guess, or not snapping on a mesh you don't want. And then distance here, you just try something. If it doesn't work, you change it. So project all, I'm going to say no to the poly paint. And you see that was not enough because like this piece here did not snap. So I'm just going to put it a little bit higher and project all again. And there we go. It snapped completely on it. So I didn't really have much to gain to reproject, but you see it went from like smoother to a little bit more precise. So just imagine if your mesh was like really precise with detail, project all would be able to capture almost all of them, like 99.9% of all of them, which in my book is like good enough. So in that stage, now I have like this mesh that pretty much has a topology it's going to have for the entire time until the end, actually. So I can put it back in my scene. So I just go here, back in my scene, and I insert this here, and I can delete the old one. So now I have this piece here. And what I'll do is I'll actually, like from the backup, the duplicate that I have here, I'm just going to get rid of like this piece here. So now I just have the new one that's on top like this here. Right. So delete hidden. There we go. So now I have this piece here, and now I'm going to be like polishing it. So I'm going, basically since this is the quick technique, I'm not going to use things like panel loops or creases or whatever. I'm all going to do the cleaning by hand. So the result that is this here like will be done by hand. If I remove the poly paint, you can see this is the piece. If I put like a material that is less, that is more like it lets you show like maybe more like the imperfection, you'll see that it's not perfect, but I was able to do this piece like in, like if I go like top speed, I can probably like do this piece, polish this piece in like maybe like 20 minutes, not like more or less, I guess, something like that, which like sums up for like the entire head not being like that much time. So that's, and because I know that I'm never going to like zoom in more than this, for example, I know that doesn't need to be cleaner. So once again, talking about efficiency, well, this is taken in calculation what technique I'm going to be using. So so you see, yeah, exactly. So this piece here, it's done entirely by hand with the same technique I'll be showing here. So once again, I have this piece here. I can subdivide it a little bit more. I guess I'll stay at that level here. And to polish an object that already exists, I'm basically going to be repeating the same 3 steps that I told before. The mass, edge, and volume. No, sorry, mass, edge, and planes. But this time I'm kind of like reverse. I'm going to reverse a bit the order. So the first thing is like mass. The mass is pretty much like already there. But the idea here is that I'll probably do my planes before doing my corners. And the reason why is because you'll see me in action. But the reason why is because when I work on the planes, I'm kind of like going to make my corners like very sharp. And I'm going to decide how like smooth or sharp I want my corners at the end, actually. Because working on the edges is less destructive to the planes than working on the planes is destructive to the edges, actually. So working on the planes, this is the next step, step number 2 in that case. So I'm just going to take, at this point, I'm going to take H polish, and I'm actually going to just like flatten my surfaces while trying to make sure that the edges have a like a certain like cleanliness, that it's clean.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah,
makes sense.
For example, like this edge is not clean because it's not straight. And if you want to actually go for like something that is more like cubic, and if you're trying to do a straight line, do a straight line. If you're trying to do a curve, but don't be in the middle, because if it's like ambiguous, it's not going to read well. And exactly, so like if you're not gonna get your like hard surface point across. Like it's fine if it's a curve, it's fine if it's a straight line in hard surface, but it has to look like surgical. So make sure that it's like it's clean, and by clean I mean surgical. So I mean precise or calculated. Also, those are all good keywords for what I'm trying to explain. So if like the lines was curvy like this, I would probably like take my move brush and try to like move it back to like a straight line, actually. So you see, I kind of like calculated the size, the radius of my brush, knowing that like if I push it, it would go back to like something of a straight line. So basically, when I'm polishing my planes, I kind of try to pay attention to that also. So making the plane straight, clean, but also making sure that the edge is somewhat straight. And if it's not, I'll just move it. So now that's the explanation, and I'm just going to go ahead and do it. So I use Alt now, because if I use not Alt, it creates a cavity here. So just keep in mind to experiment how it works with the Alt button. And if for example, my edge here is just not helping me with my polishing, like you see, it's kind of like hard to make like this a plane because this edge is so rounded. I will actually go and just like insist a little bit more on making this cavity really a cavity. And what I did, I just took my dam standard, I lowered the intensity. So you see the intensity is like, I have to press very strong, like really hard to actually go deep, but it actually helps me to just sometimes get like, you see like this, like how smooth this is. If my dem standard was too high, I would be doing this. I don't want to do a detail. I want to really affect the mass. So I'm going to probably go for a larger radius, less intensity, and really like just like making sure that like the cavity is really like a cavity, so that in this like perspective, it's not rounded like this. I'm not going for a round corner. I'm actually going for a sharp corner. And this is what I did with dem standard like this. So now that this is, I insisted more on my corner, I can go back to like H polishing like this. This little like dip here, I could actually like use clay if I feel that that H polish is not really responding well. But I could also just try and insist with H polish. What I'm trying to say is H polish is it's a polishing tool. It's not a tool to create mass or whatever. It's really there to just once the mass is there, just make it like cleaner. I'm not using it to build anything. So like H polish like this. Or you know what? Might as well, while I'm here, planar, sometimes I'm going to use it to like fill holes like this. So you see planar, it kind of like fill the hole. You start from like somewhere where your plane is straight. You use Alt and you just like draw it. So yeah, I messed up like here and here, but that's not really a problem. We can just clean it. Yeah, often I'm going to be using a quite large radius because that's really what's going to make like the surface smooth. If you actually use too small of a radius, you might actually have too much like brush strokes recorded in your work. I'm actually going to clip things here like this. This here is a bit messy. It's a bit too much noise. I think I'm just going to like change the design completely. Planar. There we go. So if I change the design too much, I might actually maybe destroying the topology. So that's something to just be careful with. But it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It's just you might experience like some hassles on the way, but it doesn't really stop me, I'd say. So yeah, I mean, there's still some work, but just for fun, just to show you like what I did so far, I'm just going to go back to in my history just to show where we came from. So blocking, ZBrush, reprojecting, and then the rest is like by hand working on like making it cleaner. And I'm using the metal matte cap so that I actually really see like where my planes are like uneven and stuff. So this, I would call it like a first pass of polishing. So if like my object is going to be more like seen from close, I might actually want it to be even cleaner. And by cleaner, for example, what I don't like at the moment is like, if you look at my at like the main plane, so I'll call like this thing the main plane. If you look at it from like this angle, let's say like with another matte cap, you'll see that like this line, Jesus Christ. I'll go in an orthographic view actually. There we go. So you see like this line here is going like more like up, like in, let's say like that direction. And this line here is actually going in the opposite direction. Plus there's like a curve on this line. And by analyzing the edge, you can see that like your plane is not really straight, which will make for like a kind of like a dip. When you look at the light, if you look at the light moving on your object, like the blasting white spot, you're gonna see that it's kind of like doing like a diagonal here, and then like it's gonna dip here like this. So this is like a sign of what I call wobbliness, and I try to maybe get rid of that if I want things to look even like sharper and cleaner. So what I actually am going to do is I'm basically going to use move, and I'm going to move my edges to make sure all my edges have like a good clean flow, and then I'm going to go back to cleaning my plane. So when I use the move brush, you can move it. You can use it just like this. But since I'm talking about the move brush, I'm going to talk about this little thing here called AccuCurve. This is a trick that Furio showed me, which it's so cool. First of all, move, when you use it, it does like kind of like a line like this, right? But if you actually activate AccuCurve, it's going to do a spike like this. And I really love it. And I have it on a shortcut where I can enable it and disable it anytime I can. And sometimes to move my edges, since this is like, this one is a cavity, I might want AccuCurve to be activated. So I'm just going to give like little strokes so that this line and this line might are maybe a little bit more like parallel. Or if they're not parallel, that they taper at the same like calculation, whatever. Same thing for like this one here. Make sure it's like somewhat straight with this one here. This one I'm gonna let it taper in a different direction. I'm just gonna make sure it's like somewhat the same direction. And for here, so you see by changing I'm looking at this line and this line here right now. And just by moving it like this, see in this line and this line from different angles, I know that like, because now my edges are kind of like calculated to be kind of like following each other, so some form of line flow, I know that once that I polish the plane, it's probably going to give me like a better like sheen of light moving on my object, hence a cleaner surface. So now I'm going to go back to cleaning the plane, and I'm going to basically do the same thing again. But keep in mind that when I use H-polish, sometimes instead of using H-polish, sometimes I'm going to be using smooth. So like right now I'm smoothing because I kind of like want to melt. There's like a bump. It's kind of like hard to see, but there's like a bump on this, and I kind of like just want it to melt. So if I want it to melt, I'm going to be using smooth. If I want it to, I don't know how to explain that, flatten, I'm going to be using H-polish. So I'm just using smooth right now, and then I'm going to go back to H-polish. So H-polish, I'm going to use a darker color because it's kind of hard to see my planes. Using Alt, sometimes using not Alt. Oops. Like I'd rather, like I could like mask this part here, but like I'm always going to be like somewhat uneven on the edge and creating damage. So this is why I kind of like prefer just to use Alt rather than like masking or that sort of stuff. Actually, something I could be using, but it's actually making the process longer. So I prefer to use my dexterity, but I could actually store a morph target and like use H-polish and restore the state here using the morph brush. But it's kind of like adding steps. Like I'd rather know how to do it like clean with like one swoop rather than adding those techniques. But sometimes when something is way too complicated, I'm going to add those extra steps, like using morph targets and that sort of stuff. I'm just going to go back where I was before. I saved the morph target. Oops, using Alt and whatever. So I think I'm going to subdivide one more time now, just because I want to get rid of a bit of the pixelation. So you see like those lines here are not super clean. So I might want to move them just a little bit. Too much of a big radius. There we go. All right. So at this point, I'm going to call this done. And what I'm going to do, the last thing I'm going to do is actually making sure that my edges have the appropriate amount of like smoothness or sharpness that I want. So by working on this piece, I made some of my edges sharper than other. Like this one is like quite sharp, whereas like maybe like this edge here is like smoother, right? And I kind of like things to be more smooth because it captures more light on the edge, kind of like a bevel. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that things are like smoother. And I prefer to go from sharp to smooth rather than smooth to sharp. So this is why I will let things get sharp like this in my process. So what I'm going to do by using smooth, which is already, that's what I have selected, I'm just going to actually maybe give a little like smooth to like some of my edges so that they kind of like widen and capture more light. Like this. Okay, so bear with me. I haven't really taken care of like this side and the back side, but this is basically like showing the essence of what I'm trying to explain here. And you're more than welcome to make some edges more like sharper than others. But if you do, just make sure that it looks like planned. Yeah. And so if I wanted, for example, to have one edge that is smoother, I'm going to show you like a little trick. First, what I'll do is I'll kind of like bevel my corner and then I'll make it smooth. So to bevel something, this is like a weird trick. I don't remember where I got it from, unfortunately. But using just the clay brush, not the clay buildup like I was using before, but using the clay brush, I'm going to actually like lower the radius and look at if I actually make the radius big like this. I use Alt and I just draw here. You see, it's kind of like a flat 45 degree that just needs a little H polish to become really clean. You can actually add a lazy mouse in there just to make it even like cleaner. So you see, I can just do this, and then I can just go on it and give a little like H polish, and then like it would be like clean. So let's say you want it like everywhere. It was just a matter of like, oops, start over with this, then H polish. Whatever. I didn't make it super clean here. I was a bit too reckless, but if I was a bit more careful when I did my stroke at the beginning, I could have had it like as clean as here. But like that would be like how to make the bevel. And if I want it to be a round corner, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bevel of that bevel. I could have done the bevel of the bevel before I actually cleaned my bevel. Actually, you know what? Instead of like saying it, I'm just going to do it. Going back to before I did the bevel. Okay. So clay, 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 like this. And then lower the radius. I'm going to make a second bevel in there. So I kind of like already told him what I want, and the only thing that I need to do now is smooth it so it becomes it becomes round. So now it's more like a round corner, and if like anything needs to be rounder around it, kind of like this. And if I unsharpened some area that I wanted to keep sharp, I can always just like re-H polish some areas like this. But now like I've given it like a rounder like feel to it. So this is the technique. Oh, here it's a little pinched. There we go. Yeah. So this is pretty much a technique, and like if you practice it, if you spend more time on it, it'll get cleaner and stuff. But this is basically how I do like a lot of my like round corners with the dexterity quick technique. So that covers basically like how to make your plane look clean. the method. So like using the edges, making sure your edges are like have a good line flow and it feels calculated, and then making sure your planes are like clean enough to the amount of cleanliness you need. You finish by like making sure your corners are as round as you want, smooth, I'd say. And if you need to make like more beveled edges, like wider edges, well, you can just cut them manually and like that sort of stuff. So like the next point would be to talk about how I do the mid details and the details, which is pretty quick. I'm pretty much at the end of like the demonstration for the quick technique. But before that, I guess, is there like any question about?
Yeah, we got a bunch of questions coming through.
Okay, cool. I have that I talked for too long in this.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I was just letting you get in a rhythm, and then we can do this and then fire questions off.
Okay.
So when you're working in a technique like this, when working with collectibles, how do you decide when the mesh looks good enough?
Well, what's define good enough? I guess I'll create my own definition. I'd say I'll go with like the scale that the client gives me. Like if he says like, oh, it's a 112 scale, 112th is pretty small, so you don't really need things to be like that clean so that they actually look clean. For something like the Punisher that I did, it's like this guy here and there. Yeah, there you go. This guy. For this guy, it's like that's 1/4, I think. Anyways, for something like this, I'll pretty much try to get something that looks clean from, like for example, the Sentinel. If the Sentinel here was, just give me a sec. No, not this one. Sorry, I was not working in the right file. I just want to put, before I lose it, I just want to put my, yeah, okay. Okay, so yeah, so for, let's say like this Sentinel head is supposed to be like the scale of the Punisher, this guy. Probably I would make sure that like it looks clean when I look at it, like in a like portrait like dimension, like this here. Let's say like there's like the rest of the body that exists under. Like if it looks good from this like this close, this is pretty much what the eye is going to capture when you look at it printed. I guess this is kind of like my idea of it with my tests that I did with my prototype, with my Form 2, so the print prototype I made. So yeah, I think that would be it. But personally, I kind of like to go the extra way because at the end I like to show my renders. So maybe I'll make sure that it looks like clean enough from like this distance here, I'd say. So it would actually answer the same question as like how small you're going to make your details. Well, it's going to be like depending on how close you're going to get. To answer something like in another way, I will also try to make sure what is important. Like for example, the head of the character is like the most important part. So I'm probably going to put more time on the head of the character. But like if this piece was like on his belt, for example, and there's no focus on it, sometimes I'll leave it like pretty dirty and nobody notices, which is like sneaky, but it does the trick, and I waste less time and I can spend more time doing other stuff like playing video games or doing more art, or soon changing the diapers of my baby. So like you kind of like have to actually know to be efficient sometimes.
So do you change this workflow for when you're making a gaming asset, or do you just hand off what you've done to the studio and then they make it a game ready model?
No. When we do for video games, we do it from A to Z. Like I mean from the blocking to the textured model. So we're gonna make sure everything looks clean. But in terms of like the comparison between collectibles and video games, it's pretty much like the same technique, except for like when you do collectibles, you have to really make sure that it's like printable. So like you have to really know about like making your thicknesses enough so that it doesn't break. So there's like a lot of like that technicality that goes with it. But outside of that technicality, it's like the same techniques that I'm going to use and the same like mindset of like what to focus on and whatnot. In terms of like the ZBrush, when I do something for video games, often you don't end up really doing like fabric detail, like t-shirt fabric, because it can be done in Painter. But if you want to do like a nice like art dump with ZBrush, you can actually just learn to maybe doing like a quick UV on your high res and learning to use displacement maps to do like textile and that sort of stuff. Or if you use like Keyshot, then like in Keyshot, you can add your displacement map for details. But I'm just trying to say that like it's pretty much like the same approach I'm going to use. It's just that like for video games, sometimes I'm not going to do like the sharp detail thing. I'm going to keep it at like, if it's cloth, I'm going to keep it at like maybe like memory wrinkles, but I'm not going to do like the fabric. And for like hard surface, I'm probably not going to do like the battle damage, for example. Like I'm going to keep it at a clean armor.
Okay, and then here's another question. When you're reproducing or creating mechanical machinery or characters, do you define every function of the individual piece, or is it more about just the aesthetic and creating or reproducing the form? So if you're creating,
there's really different school of thoughts, and my school of thoughts is basically as long as you sell the illusion. So for me, functionality is actually important, but not at the extent of my design preferences or my time, I'd say. So I'm probably going to go in the categories of artists that don't really spend so much time studying the functionality of something, as long as it kind of like does look functional. So I'm all about like creating the illusion. And for people that are really like technical, like they probably like they see through that illusion and they think I'm full of shit, which is fine. It's cool, whatever. But I really found that I'm really happier with my approach compared to my needs, and my needs are not necessarily to make something perfectly functional. Like I remember there was like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that like for like Avatar, they made sure that like the mechs are like actually kind of like one for one work
functional.
Like functional, yeah, exactly. Which is kind of scary because it like lets you know that like those guys at that studio, they can do like war machines. But, you see, it's like that's something that like I find virtuous to have this knowledge, but I would rather like I wouldn't do that for me. I wouldn't have pleasure doing that. So if I take like this guy here, the amount of like thoughts that's put behind like the function is basically that it looks somewhat like force fed of like whatever liquid is in that, and it's like there's like all the circuitry that's pretty much like there just to look a bit like alien and like forced, but like where like the cables are going and that sort of stuff is I hadn't really thought of that. That's more like design and on the fly. Like knowing visual language, I think is pretty important, and that's part of functionality. Like the fact that you're going to add like grids and stuff. Like grids is basically like just something that's good for like removing heat from like something. So like it's kind of like it tells you like, oh, okay, so this things need to be like cold. So maybe it's because like there's like a main frame in there. So I'm gonna have like those kind of thoughts, but they're really like surface level, just so I have like a little bit of function, or at least as much as I feel comfortable with, I'd say.
What's your polygon count of all the subtools? How many subtools do you have for this? 40. How many do you have?
Well, first of all, right now I think I have a bug that doesn't really say the amount that I have, but for this head alone, I have 25 million polygons. And for the full body, I probably end up. I don't even know. That's
at the top in the large icon marker. It'll give you the number of subtools.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like the full body is not part of this Z tool. So I don't know. I would need to open the other one, and it's gonna take too much time. But like, I would say, you know what? I would say probably like 150 million polys, maybe less, 100 million. I don't know. But like for example, like I don't really care about that. I go with how well my scene is like moving, and I'm really just gonna like start like dividing things when my scene starts to actually like lag. I'm never really gonna look at like my poly count, because I'm like I said earlier, I'm always gonna try to be at the lowest possible. So when I do like a detail, like how precise, like so you see like now there's pixelization, right? But I like already at this point here, there's like no more. Like, and I know that I'm never going to see the character closer, so there's no reason for me to go higher than that. And some of my things, like this one here, it doesn't take much time before you see like the pixelization because it's not an important part. So I'll always try to stay low, so I know that I never really need to look. And once I find my scene to be laggy, I'm maybe gonna cut my model in half, like top and bottom, but I almost never need to do that. So that's basically like pretty much my approach. I'd say my only like calculation is that I'll try to never go higher than 10 million polys on one subtool. That's kind of like, I realize that my preference in like speed or like smoothness is that's kind of like a magic number I figured out for myself. And the only reason why I will go above 100 million, 10 millions for one subtool is when, let's say it's like one naked body that like cannot have a seam because it's like, it's naked, there's no wrinkles to hide like a split, and it's just complicated. Sometimes I'll actually like, I'll go like to maybe like 15, 20, but like 20 now you're getting like pretty high. I mean, I have a really great machine, but I mean, it's just like, there's still like a number you have to, that's where any like machine will start to maybe not run so smoothly. You know?
All right, well, we'll have you move into now. You wanted to go into showing more of the detailing of that one piece. While you're doing that, if you find a way, someone was asking a specific question, if you could share maybe a technique, how you would do a perfect half circle panel line. If you
perfect half circle, what?
A half circle panel line. Any technique that you might be able to share while you're going into this detail stuff, if you can think of any way while you're working.
So a half circle panel line.
Half circle panel line is how they put it.
Panel line, because
I think what they're looking for is a half circle, perfect half circle panel that they could probably pull out of the surface. Is how I'm taking the question.
Okay, because like the first thing I'm thinking of half circle panel line is basically like how this remains like a half circle after like, and it being like a panel. And to answer this question, that would basically just mean like I will just insert a cylinder subtool or a capsule subtool, and I will just like insert it. Well, actually, you know what? I'll just go quickly. Insert primitive. Okay, so I basically just did that so I can have like this thing here. And I'll basically just like move it into place like this. I would do it like cleaner, right? But technically, if I actually have this here, it's pretty much like my tool. It lets me make sure that like this line here turns like in a clean surgical circle. That's what I understand from the panel.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's just a question of like mid details and masks, which I can probably show in my while I continue here.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go into that where you wanted to go to the next level of detailing that out. That'll help.
Right. Because like once I start to show tricks, I can go crazy. Like I know a couple of tricks. It's not the fundamentals of like how to build my masses and stuff. Anyways, right. So but just to say, I kind of want to jump in that now that like the question has been asked. But like for example, if I want to do like a half circle of something, like like using masks to like extrude shapes. Like this is something that I really like to do. So you see, like by simply like drawing like a shape and making sure that like your lines are flat like this or whatever, you can basically like create like a volume. It's like a mid-detail volume, but still you can pull it out and like make it look clean just because the mask was clean at the beginning. If it needs to be like, if you're sturdy enough, you can actually make like a capsule shape like this, just by drawing it and then pulling it out, and then you have like some half circle shape. Same thing in the other direction, of course, like this. And if you need it to be like from the edge, well, you can just like do something like this, making sure this is whatever. And one trick that I use is like so often I will sharpen and blur my mask, then I can sharpen it again. And if I just do like, let's say inflate in deformation, then I can pull out some like half circle shape. This is like, you see, I don't really understand the question that well. I'm just trying to show like little ideas of like maybe what the question was, but you know, whatever. Otherwise, there's like tricks that I really like to use. Like there's like a brush called Trim Hole that is in the light box, but I've put it in my main menu because I like to do it. I like it a lot. And it's one that lets you do like holes like this. So sometimes what I will do is I will actually like put it like on the edge to do like a detail like this, or I will like if you do it with an angle, like you can do like those kind of like details here, and you can really go like as far as like with alt, you can do like this kind of like detail like this, which is kind of like a half circle, I guess. Or trim front. So that was trim hole. Trim front, that's pretty cool also, because you can basically just like decide to trim. Okay, so the same way that like planar cut will do like a plane like this, you see it's only cutting at the same level as like the first polygon, but it will just go a little bit deeper before doing so. Like planar cut, it does that. Well, trim front kind of like does the same thing, but it's gonna be like compared to like the camera angle. So trim front, I like to do like details like this, and just to help me dig deeper, I'll just use like this like round alpha. So sometimes you can do like details like this, and this is like proper. It's like compared to like it compares itself to like the camera angle. So if you go in that direction, it's gonna do this. But if you want this line to be this line here, you just have to be somewhat flat to the surface, and then you can do like that kind of like detail here. If you start from closer to the edge, then it's gonna do it less deep. And this is kind of like a half circle thing. So there you go, 7 half circle techniques. Choose the one you like. Like to resume where I was, at this point, when you have like your piece that technically has like its planes that are like pretty much like clean at the level you need them to be clean, the next step is going to add some mid details. There's like 3 ways that I add mid details, I'd say. There's going to be using alphas, using masks, and using cavities. So to replicate the exact same like thing as here, for example, like this like cavity here is basically done with orb crack. So orb crack is kind of like damn standard. It does like a cavity like this, but it does it like really sharp, like in a V shape. So like if you look at like the profile, it's kind of like a V, whereas like damn standard would be like you see like round and round. So just to draw it, damn standard this is like a line. Damn standard would do this, and like orb crack would do like this here. So knowing that it's going to do like 2 flat planes, like a V, sometimes I'll use it as like mid details to actually like do like something like this. Now it's just a question of being like somewhat like clean while doing it. So you can basically like, it's like acting weird when it gets near to the edge. So sometimes it's just a matter of finding the right camera angle so like it doesn't get influenced by the depth. And you just try to do it like in one stroke clean. You can clean this like later. And sometimes if you need to actually bridge too, well, now it's a question really of precision, I'd say, but it's kind of like, it's doable. Like you see, like this is like, I can work with this. I just did it in one shot. I could have been cleaner, but I can always just go in there and just do what I need for it to look cleaner. So what doesn't look clean right now? Well, my lines are kind of like curved compared to the other ones. So I'm just gonna go and like, maybe like just push this so it's somewhat like straighter, like this, Like here, it's like not as deep. Like I say, if I was just a little bit more diligent and I give it a few try, maybe I could have done it like clean from the beginning. Maybe with a lazy mouse, I could have like do it in one stroke also. I like to do it like in a way that it doesn't work, so I show how I recover from it also sometimes. But you see, H polish. Now I have this here. So this demonstration is actually also helping me to show that I didn't plan for this in the masses of my object at the beginning. Like this, I knew that this would be a mid detail, something that doesn't really like is seen from the silhouette, but it's just like an addition for like mid frequency details on my object. So it's not a small detail. I still call it a detail. It's a big one, but still it's not like the fundamental of my shape. So once that this is done, I can actually like go even like further with like mid details, and I could actually add like this like extrusion was added like by mask. I could do like something like this also. Actually, I'm going to subdivide before I go further because I'm starting to get pixelated to a point I don't really like. But let's say you want some like extrusion. You can pretty much just like draw yourself like your area of extrusion, making sure the shape of the extrusion is pleasant and follows the line flow of your shape. So I'm just going to cut it, maybe following like the lines of the contour. Maybe I'm going to want to make some of them rounder. Like you see, like right there, it's like too sharp. Like it doesn't work with the visual language of like the surroundings. This corner is so sharp, but it's right next to an edge that is actually round. I would probably keep it rounder in that area because I don't want to mix sharp edges with round edges too much or too close one to each other. So talking about like visual language and choices of shapes, this is more like a concept design thing. But like I try to make sure that like when I do a choice, like even if it's a mask and a mid detail, it does not betray the other visual language used for my bigger shapes. So for this one, the shape that I'm using right now, I'm trying to convey it in my mid details also, like this mask right here. So I'm just going to make sure the lines are somewhat like straight. And what I like to do, like I said, is I like to do like a little blur and sharpen. So you see it became like cleaner with my blur and sharpen, and some areas actually became rounder, which I like. So that now this mask is ready to be manipulated in any way you want. You can basically just with the action line, you can like pull it like this, and then you have like a 90-degree extrusion. I call it 90-degree because I'm talking about like this line here. It's kind of like 90-degree. Or you can push it in. You can push it in instead, of course. There you go. After push it in. Jesus Christ. You can maybe like change like its shape so that like maybe like these angles they bevel more than these ones, which creates more dynamism. It's less like static. Or what I can do is before I even push it in, I can do like some blur if I want my edges to be less sharp. So if I hit blur once, the blur that you have in the blur mask, masking here, blur mask. If I press it once and now it's like smoother. So when I'm going to extrude, it's going to be, you see, it's smoother, it's rounder. It actually fits a bit more with the edges that are around it. Or you can go like really smooth, but if you go too smooth, it might start to look not intentional or I have the word in French in my head, but not in English. Malhabile, maladroit, clumsy, I guess. Kind of like not intentional. I don't know.
Happy mistakes.
Well, no, the happy mistake. This. I won't call it a happy mistake because I feel that like smooth like this, you're probably getting in the territory of like somebody that doesn't know how to do his creases and his like sharp edges. It looks more like you missed the target, I'd say.
Sure.
So just make sure that your choice stays within the visual language of what's needed. In this case, hard surface. But something you can do, another way of masking things that I really like is instead of using blur mask and masking here, you're gonna control click on your object, and this is going to blur only in one direction. So you see it blurred inside of my mask, but it didn't blur in what's unmasked. And hence, when I'm going to pull it out, I'm going to have this here, where like one edge is smooth and the other one is sharp. If you look at it from the profile, this edge is smooth and this edge is sharp here. And this was accomplished with control click. So I really like that little trick here. If I push it inside, it's going to do like a more of a pool shape, like this. And if I want another result, I just invert my mask, control click, and then the pushing in will just trade what edge was curvy and what edge was sharp, like this. There we go. And if like this edge is like too sharp, you can always like just with a little like smooth brush, just giving a little like quick smooth pass. Here I smoothed too much though. I was not diligent enough. You can also like reduce the strength of smooth, but you see like that, it's pretty cool. It's like still a little bit smoothed. It's nice. Here I don't like, but see, so I can just like reduce the strength of my smooth by pressing space and shift. There you go. So that's like how to do like mid details with the mask. And the other way would be to do mid details with alphas. So with alphas, you can simply like load one of your alpha, whatever. Like I'll go here. I'll take. Oh, if it's gonna load. I'll take this alpha here. And so what this alpha does is it does like that kind of detail. My mid value is not correct, so I'm just going to fix it to maybe like 1 or 2. Yeah, it's still present. I would need to put it to 1.5, but I can just like use some radial fade. There we go. All right, so this is like the detail I can put on my model. But the thing is, like, you can experiment with having like really huge radius when like placing like a detail, and you can actually maybe experiment and use it at your advantage. So what you can do is like maybe like, I don't know, oops. Like that's disgusting, so I won't do that. But like maybe if you use it like around here, it can make for like somewhat of a cool mid detail. Now I kind of like busted this part here, so I could use like store morph target, like I said earlier. You store morph target before and you clean it after with the morph brush, or you could mask, or you could use, I'm going to show another little trick here, the depth. I really like using depth. You can find it in brush depth here. And my 3 options that I use is the graphic, embed, and depth mask. So depth mask is to activate it. And then if you take like the top here and you lower it like this, you're basically telling your brush, do not affect anything that's on top of me right now. So if I place the alpha again, you see that it's not even touching the side here, except like, don't mind this like smudge here. This is me earlier, but you see that like I didn't create the smudge from later. See, if I remove my depth mask and I try again, it does this. If I actually activate the depth mask and I play with the height like this, it's actually not even like applying it to the side here. So depth is pretty cool also. So yeah, this is like another way I could do like some mid details. Yeah, and also like the strength of it is important. Don't like, if it's supposed to be subtle, don't do it too harsh. And once it's placed, you can do it like, you can give it like a little smooth pass also. So that would be like a detail. I don't think that really it's fitting in terms of like design right now, but I'm just like playing around and stuff. So at this point, I could say that I'm done with my mid details. I could go like into the last phase of applying the details themselves, which are super easy. I'll do it like right off the bat. It's going to take like 5 seconds, but my details are basically just applying alphas and adding cavities. So I'm going to go back to my orb crack. I'll do basically what I did here. You can just like have this orb crack follow the contour. You have to be really diligent. Maybe it's going to take a try or two to do it clean. Like you see, like the distance between the edge and the cavity is shorter than like here. So I kind of like changed it by accident. So if it's not too visible, just let it pass. If it's actually noticeable, you might want to try again. Just hold your breath like a sniper and do it worse than I did it before. There you go. Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. Maybe I'll just follow the line. Hold the line. Love is always on time. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I can change maybe like the radius to just create some like different side. When I'm resuming my cavity, I'm just trying to not press so hard, and once it starts to draw, I gauge how much I need to press on it. There we go. So like that would be like clean enough, I'd say. I can do it everywhere else I want, and then at the end I can just like start adding like other kind of like alphas and details. Maybe I'm gonna go like deeper so it's really readable. Deeper, I mean more intense. Oop, changing the bit value. And this is just a question of like deciding where you need to actually attract attention or etc. But you see like the rest of like those like little details here, they're all applied. It's just alphas that you slap on it at the right place. You just experiment until you find something that's like visually appealing. And that would be pretty much like how you actually get to this stage here, which is pretty much the end of the demonstration for the quick technique, I'd say. Is there any questions?
You're using a lazy mouse, I'm assuming, right? You have lazy mouse turned on for the orb crack that you're using?
Yeah, it was turned on. Yeah, exactly.
Do you use lazy snap at all? Someone's asking.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so you're not gonna like me, Paul, but like I didn't understand the lazy snap. It works with which tools? Because I know it works with the crease brush, but sometimes I've been trying to apply it to. Actually, no, I'm talking about the morph target ability of the crease brush. Sorry. The lazy snap, yes, I'm going to be using it sometimes, but the thing is that, and that is going to sound like a total brag, but I feel that I got good enough to just resume it without it, that it's just one less option that I need to click, and I just win some milliseconds. So I just got good enough to do like a decent or a good result without using the lazy snap, that I'll really use it for that. But sometimes when a case is like, I just cannot do it correctly, I actually might be using it. So yes, lazy snap is what I would consider. It's a good tool. It's a really good tool.
Do you use the VDM brushes at all from when you're working in your workflows?
BDM?
Okay, so that's a no. No, he doesn't use the VDMs. It doesn't look like.
Okay, all right. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I wouldn't expect you to use everything. So someone was asking, and I just wanted to find out if you were.
Yeah, when the releases come out, and when I'm gonna use like the what about minimal amount of free time that I have to just like play around and experiment. And at this point, I pretty much just like focus on like the tools that really add something to my workflow, and the other ones I will like sometimes create like shortcuts on the top here, just so I do like a reminder to keep experimenting with them, because I find that they can help me, and it's just in due time I'll get to them, right? That's how I deal with those. But I get tools that work with my workflow, because my workflow is so like cemented in me that it pretty much became like the pillar of like my approaches and stuff.
Yeah. And Kevin brought in another question just to highlight the brushes again. He's asking, he forgot to write them down. What brushes were you using to cut in and then flattening to a specific depth? I think he's referring to your orb brush for cutting in, and then you were showing your planers. Okay,
well, I'll just go again, and because it's like the brushes I showed earlier, they're more for like that step of like detailing. But what I showed, I started by talking about planar, which is kind of like the fundamental brush of the others. Planar is basically something that will flatten everything to the first normal that you pressed on. So the normal of this, like those polygons are its silhouette. So let's say I want to cut this piece. I can start from here, and I can just use planar and cut this. Now the thing is that I never really get the result that I want just for this kind of like need. So planar, I will use it for something else. But it's just a demonstration of what planar does. So it's going to take like the normal of this thing here, and it's going to try to flatten everything to its level. Now it's not doing it correctly because my radius is too small, but basically that's the point. Now planar cut will do the same thing, but it's just going to dig deeper before doing it. So you see, it dug deeper, and then it digs deeper, and then it actually does the planar thing from before. So knowing that, I can show trim front, so brush trim front that you're going to find in the light box under trim brushes. Trim brush, what it does, trim front, it will, depending where you start on an angle, it will actually flatten to the camera, angle everything that you go over. So like this here, right? But if you don't overdo it, you can do stuff like this here, basically. And like you see, like the line is not really aligned to here. So this is just a matter of like placing your camera, maybe like this. You see, no, I overdid it, like this, almost. Now you see, like pretty much like my line is now parallel to this one, so it looks like clean now.
Yep.
This is like trim front, and trim hole is basically just a brush that will dig using the camera angle. So it digs like this, depending on how strong you press on it. And if you do it like on the side, well, it digs like this. So if you actually kind of like move your brush to the side like this, you can dig. You can do like those kind of like holes. And if you do it without, you can do like the opposite. So like if you do both of them, it does like those like inclined like bolty thing. See, this is how much I'm a functional artist. I don't even know what's that called. I call it inclined bolty thing.
It works. It works. I like it.
Perfect.
It works. I get what you're doing.
Exactly. So this
we'll let you move on to your next technique that you wanted to share with them.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So like those little things I showed at the end are more like tricks. Like I have a lot of things to show actually, but let's just jump to the other the clean technique first. You'll notice that by the end of the clean technique, it starts to get pretty similar when you get to like adding mid details and details. So the clean technique is just going to go through like my panel looping approach. So if I take, for example, like another part of this character here, so let's say like the cheek is pretty complicated. This part here is also like pretty interesting. I'll take like just this part because it's like simpler. But like let's say the way I did this this object here is basically with panel loop, right? But the way to get there is like so that it's not like too long. There's like a certain approach that I will show you. So first of all, I'll just save it as like a little like screenshot like here. I'll go back to my blocking. Is that the blocking? No, it's not the blocking. Is that the blocking? That's the blocking. All right. So like this guy here is actually sculpted in the piece. So the way that I actually did like this piece here is exactly how I actually shown before. So I pretty much like had like the model like this at some point, and I knew I wanted to do like some like eyebrow on him. It's maybe a bit too low. I'm just gonna push it to double. Okay. So basically I just like did like the mass like this. Like I said earlier, mass, edge, and plane. So I did the mass. Once that I had the mass, once that I have the mass, I just do like the edges. So the edges is basically going to insist on what is really an edge using my dam standard like this. This is an edge, edge, edge. This could remain like a round thing, so I'm not gonna like insist on adding an edge here. I'm just gonna add the edge here instead. So those are my edges. I can go as far as actually at this point cleaning so that my line flow is nicer. I can change it to be more dynamic also. A little diagonal here is going to do some help. All right. Then I'm going to, with H polish or smooth brush, do my planes. With alt or no alt. Then a little quick cleaning for the ones on the side. This. Yes, I'm destroying the this part here, but for the moment I don't really care. I can always clean it later, or just alt and smooth it back. Smooth, smooth. And then I can do like a last pass of like making it look like it's actually its own piece and not an extrusion of the base by using like an orb crack and maybe like insisting on it being like a cavity. Now I want to really test like the depth or the width. But you know what I said earlier, like I'm just trying to sell the illusion. This is pretty much like a trying to sell the illusion moment. Like just having like this cavity just already like makes it feel that it's more like modular of the thing, like added or separate, rather than like an extrusion of it. And often I'll see like some people trying at Hardsurface and maybe like lacking this little like functionality or like visual language. And I find that like by insisting that some plates are separated with like this just little cavity tricks often will actually help just to add some intricacy to the detail. So technically like that would be it. Then I could like add like whatever detail I need to add or mid detail, like if like this needs to like to go lower or whatnot. But this is like the blocking stage, right? So you don't need to do things like really sharp. That would be the mid details, and then there would be like the cavity, whatever. So basically, like I'm just trying to say that this is how I actually made like the piece like it is now. You see, it's not clean. It's just there for design, but you get the point that it's like of a certain mass, certain width, a certain shape. But now when I want to actually make it clean, the way of doing it using the clean technique would be what I'm starting right now after taking a sip. That's actually part of the process. It's a very alcoholic-inducing process. I do not condone drinking alcohol while working. Maybe a bit. Anyways, whatever. So like what I'll do is I'll basically like start by doing a duplicate again. Well, actually, you know what? That's the thing. There's like many ways to start this process here. There's a way. I'll show like the simpler one, and then I'll show like another like approach to it. One way of doing it, if it's going to be isolated, like an isolated case, compared to like doing many plates at one. The isolated case would basically like do a duplicate of like this shape here. So now I have like this one that's a backup, this one that's my shape now, and I'm basically just going to try to mask it out and separate it into its own piece. So the moment I actually got it masked, I can just do show. I don't remember what's the name of the button. For me, it's just pressing on the F. It just like does show visible, I think, or show masked. Hide part. There you go. Hide part. It basically takes what's like masked and just like show it to you alone. So from there, what I can do is I can just continue like removing with the selection tool what is like the width, because I don't want the width, because the thickness I should say, because I'm going to create it using the panel loop. So I can pretty much just like remove it by hand like this. That would be one approach that I could do. Or I could just try to do like a cleaner mask, actually. First of all, I'm going to use it. I'm going to put it in gray here. So what I could do is I could actually, instead of like doing this, I could use the mask, but apply a depth limit at the bottom here. So when I mask it like this, it doesn't go like, you see, it didn't went lower than this compared to if I don't have it. You see my mask is going way deeper here, but with depth, it's actually staying at like a certain limit. So like now that I have this here, when I actually hide it, it's pretty much like the thickness is already taken care of. So that's like a cool trick also. Another way is that I use sometimes is just to draw like the poly paint. I just filled object all in white, and then I'm going to use like a darker gray, only RGB. I'm going to draw the edge here like this. And there's a plugin that's called in here Polygroup It. Polygroup It from Paint is it's going to actually take what you painted and actually separate it in different polygroups. And it's basically going to do like this maneuver here. The maneuver basically that it's doing is something that I used to do, or Cedric showed me like earlier in the past, which is basically selecting what is darker poly paint. It's the idea of like having a mask by color, mask by intensity. Then it's going to hide part of it like this. Actually, I'm going to do an invert first. It's going to hide part of it. And if you auto mask this here, auto group, basically, since like this part is now disconnected from the rest, it gets its own poly paint. So now you can just select this and pretty much just grow your selection until you pretty much have everything except your thickness. So you see, like those are like three approaches to do like the exact same thing basically. And I'd say that it varies from situation to situation which one I will use, because they all have like their little perks and stuff. So it's just good to know like there's many ways of going at it. By the way, I just realized something. You can tell how far I am in the stream by like the amount of sweat that I have on my cap here, because now I'm like at here and I started at 0, and then you have like a progression. So if you fast forward, it's just gonna feel like there's like water that's going out. So that's gross.
It can become a GIF.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah, like a human clock, whatever.
Yeah, the human sweat clock.
Human sweat clock. That's gross. It's cool. Trademark, by the way. So don't everybody.
There you go.
So once I have this here, I can just delete everything. I can just remove the poly paint. So now I have like this here, which will be like the piece I'm going to want to panel loop. Before panel looping it, I just want to make it a little bit cleaner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid, first of all, of my mid detail that's here. Well, my mid detail, whatever. And I can just get rid of it by just using planar maybe, or simply like using the clay tools to fill it. And then I can use my H polish to kind of like have like a better like surface. If I H polish too much, I might end up actually flattening my object. So you see how it went from like a curve to this. But if I actually do that, honestly, sometimes it's just a matter of like taking your move brush and kind of like pulling on it like this to just get back a little bit of the curve that you lost. So my first trick would be just be careful and don't like overdo, don't press too hard on H polish, or try to actually like maybe like, for example, like maybe use Alt so it doesn't lose its curve, or just be diligent a little bit, but you can always just like move it back to like more of a curve at the end. You have a big radius with the move curve, so you won't see like the move brush pulling it. It will just feel like it's actually like a constant curve, and you can see it by the light going on it. So now you have a really like good looking plane. And the next step will basically just making sure that like your contour is clean enough so that when you do ZBrush, it doesn't try to actually mimic the contour. So for that, there's a couple of approaches. Again, you can basically just use like in masking here, you have like, you just have mask border selected, and when you click mask by feature, it's going to select all your borders, but you can invert and use like deformation polish to just like get it a little bit cleaner. Like this little dent here might still be interpreted as like important by ZBrush, so maybe you want to maybe insist a little bit more. So you can like blur it and do another polish. So now it's like a little bit cleaner. Or you can do, also what you can do is you can use this tool in edge loop, group loop. I just put like one loop or 0. I keep some G polish, And when you click on it, it kind of like smooths your contour here. And this is just to make place for using ZRemesh and making sure the algorithm just gives you like a clean result from the get-go. So yeah, so at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to ZRemesh because I want something cleaner than this here. Here, this piece here, the ZRemesh was just done so that it's actually easier to navigate and that I still get like a lower subdivision if needed. But here, it's actually going to be important for my panel loop to have a clean mesh or a cleaner mesh, let's say. I just want to show something. That's just a parenthesis I'm adding. I just did one side, and like some people would be like, well, you just have your subdivision, so like, how do you do the other side? How do you get back your symmetry? It's really simple. It's just a matter of like deleting your subdivisions here. So now my object is with no subdivision, and now I can use deformation. Modify topology mirror and weld here, which will basically just take what's on one side and put it on the other. So you click on it, and now it's on the other side. If it was the wrong side, let's say like you have two objects and one is not the good one and it's mimicking the wrong one, you can also just do like a mirror before doing a mirror and weld. It's a little trick. But basically, mirror and weld will put your object on the other side as long as it doesn't have subdivision levels. But some might think, but you lost your subdivision levels. Yes, but you can always reconstruct them because they existed before and you have not changed the topology. So you can always just geometry here, reconstruct subdivision. So you can see I'm slowly getting back my 6 subdivision levels here. There we go. And now I can reactivate symmetry. And now I have my object in symmetry here. The one way that you would not be able to get your subdivision level back is if, for example, your object, you change its topology. And one accident that can happen is if you would do the mirror and weld, if it cuts your object in half before duplicating it like this, you're basically changing its topology so it doesn't have the potential of going back to its state before. But if you don't modify your topology, you're going to be able to mirror and weld and get all your subdivision level back here. So keep in mind, you cannot do that when you have layers. So before you start adding details on layers that you want to keep for the end, you want to keep your layers, keep in mind that any like modification that like is going to ask that you get rid of your layers, you're going to lose your layers. So you're going to need to bake it and be at peace that you baked it. There's actually a way that you keep your layers, but it's pretty hard. It's basically like you turn all your layer off, you duplicate your object, and you reproject all your layers one by one on new layers. It's super time consuming, but if you need to do it, you can do it.
Yeah, someone brought it up in the chat, Marco. I just want to let people know too. The Subtool Master, yes, it can actually mirror over with subdivision levels, since it was brought up in the chat. Someone brought it up.
Yeah, but the idea is that it's doing what I just did in the back end.
Yes.
So if your Subtool Master is going to be changing the topology by accident, it's just going to say, no, I cannot. I think it's going to actually stop you and say, I can't do it because I'm going to be changing the topology. Hence, I won't be able to reconstruct it. So what I did is I just did the whole thing by hand here, basically. Anyways, that's just for you to understand the theory that goes behind the practice, actually. So basically, back to here. So now what I'm about to do is to give it like a topology that's good enough for like a panel loop. So now we have a clean surface, or clean enough. We have a clean edge, and now we can actually ask it to do a ZRemesh. So I will go very low. I will go actually at the lowest, which is 100 polys. I will ZRemesh this, and it's going to give me this here, which could be better because like there's a lot of stars, like there are vertices that are connected to 5 other vertices or connected to 3 vertices. This is called a star. You want to have the most vertices that are not star, so that are actually connected to 4 edges. Like for example, this vertex here has 4 edges, so it's good. This one has 5 edges. This one has 3 edges, and the one with 3 or 5 edges, they're not the best. I mean, it's workable, but it's always better to try to just like have like not so much, basically. Sorry, I'm just gonna let it save. But that's the idea. Like, you don't have to go like bonkers with the ZRemesh. You just want something somewhat workable. So I'm just gonna run ZRemesh again, and you see it actually got. Actually, I'm gonna try without adapt. Yeah, ZRemesh again. Okay, there we go. You see, like this for me, like that's fine. I have like a star here, here, and here, and that would be good enough. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to make sure I'm not losing the shape that it had before. So I'm basically just going to like push everything into place. If I want something to be like a hard edge, like a 90-degree angle, I'm really going to make sure that it's a 90-degree thing. If it's supposed to be a curve, I'm going to try just to mimic somewhat of a curve like here. I don't try to make everything like super perfect for the moment. I just try to have essentially my shape be mimicked correctly. So like that would be pretty much like it, like this. Now I make sure that my line is somewhat clean. Yeah, you see like my silhouette is somewhat clean. My surface is not so clean anymore. I can just give it a little like H polish, a little additional H polish. So that is just like a little bit cleaner. If I flatten it too much, I can once again move, whoop, just give it some curve. And yeah, so that at this point I could do like my panel loop. For some reason I kind of like pushed it really far from my object, so I'm just gonna. So now I move it somewhat to its shape. It's not important if it's not 100%. There we go. So that's now my shape. I would be like ready to do a panel loop at this point. I just want to show one thing that's also can be pretty cool is there's like the keep group option that was added in I think like 2 updates ago or something. And it actually like lets you kind of like add a poly group before you do like this step here. Well, the step I'm about to show is basically like how to do like these like panels, right? But before I do that, I'm just going to add like one little complexity that actually I really appreciate. It's the fact that before you do like any ZRemesh, you can kind of like cut a poly group and have ZRemesh follow your poly group also. And what it helps you to do is stuff like this. So for example, I'm going to be using like a slice curve here. And it's basically, I just want to do anything, slice curve, anything that adds like a poly group like this in a straight line. And if I actually use the option keep group before doing my ZRemesh, it's actually like keeping those two groups separated. And that's actually pretty good if you really want to like make sure to keep like a crease. So with that line here, sorry, I'm kind of like repeating the step from before now. It's not really important, like the shape I'm trying to do, but just the fact that like that the keep group was able to keep those into 2 different poly groups will just help me when I'm going to crease my things later. Okay. So there we go. I can even like add like some kind of like level change here with that shape here, like this. I could have totally do that with like a mask later, but like on a bigger piece, sometimes you want to isolate like a portion to control more easily. But technically, now that I have this here, I can basically do my panel loop and like have some fun on like the result. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to panel loop this. Panel loop, you're going to find it in edge loop here, panel loop. I basically like bring everything down to the minimum, -100, 0, 0, 1 loop. And the thickness is the only one that's going to be variable. So I'm just going to test at this. This is too thick for me. I'm going to test at this. This looks somewhat good. But I forgot one thing important is ignore groups here, because I don't want these two polygroup to become individual. I want to keep the polygroup, but I want the mesh to be uniform. So ignore group. I click on panel loop, and now I have the thickness that's added, and it's still one whole mesh, but it kept different polygroups. And this way now, what I can do is I can pretty much like use dynamic subdivisions to test how it would smooth, but by adding creases, using the polygroup to help me add the crease. So this is like a whole like technical part for sure, but it's one that really helps a lot to create yourself like a great fundamental and polished shape. So I have this here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to start right away using dynamic subdivisions here. On top, dynamic subdivisions, I activate it. It's going to subdivide by 2 by default. So it's subdividing 2 subdivisions, but theoretically, it's not really there yet. So hence, I could not like sculpt on it because it's still using only the topology from its level 0. Like the rest is theoretical. It's like showing you how it would go if it would be subdivided by 2. But what is cool about this is that I can actually tell him a little bit like for Maya users, it would be hard edges, and for 3ds Max users, it would be smoothing group. You can pretty much use your polygroups as like smoothing groups and make sure that like where 2 polygroups are different, where they meet, that they stay hard. And the way that you do that is staying hard, basically, is is using creases, and the one to actually tell him to stay hard where there's like different polygroups is crease PG here, crease polygroup. You click on it, and instantly, anywhere where you have 2 different polygroups, now you have an hard edge. And now the question is, well, how do you make other edges hard? Well, either you change their polygroup by any means. Either you can use like in polygroup, you have group by normal, which is basically group by angle. It's at a 45 angle by default. So if you click on it, you're going to see some of your polygroup changing. Like you see, like those here, it changed, this one and this one. So if I would do a crease group, now I'm just going to use my shortcut button, but if I use crease polygroup again, now it's actually making these one hard. This one here didn't change. Now it's just a question of like, do I want it to stay curved, or do I want it to become like, to have this like edge here? I'm probably going to keep this one. No, I'm going to make it hard because it doesn't look good. It doesn't look intentional enough. So I will actually just like give it like more of an angle here, and I will try group by normal again. It didn't do anything, so maybe I'm gonna lower it to like 33 degrees. Now it did it. So there you go. I'm gonna backtrack. I'm gonna show you another way of doing it. It's the first time I enter ZModeler. I actually use ZModeler for a lot of like little tricks here and there. I actually have a shortcut for ZModeler. It's Shift Q. I just put it that because I often will go here, just so that I can actually like select an edge, go in crease mode, and just like rapidly like decide where I crease my things. My poly group by angle actually pretty much creased everything where I wanted it to be, but I could actually like manually add a crease like here, like simply clicking on it. And now I can see if I reactivate the dynamic subdivision, which is once again here, but my shortcut is Shift D. I can basically like see like what gets smoothed and what stays hard. So like for example, like I want this edge to curve, so I'm not going to add a crease there. But if I was to actually use like for example crease edge loop complete and add a crease all over it, now it would stay hard like this. But I'm going to go back because I actually like this kind of like curve here, and I like this curve here, so I'm not going to change it. One thing that you can do now to make sure that your contour is clean, because the inside of my surface is pretty clean, and the contours are pretty clean, but I can just give it like a little procedural like maneuver just to make sure it gets maybe a little bit cleaner. And it's basically to use in deformation, use polish crisp edge. So what polish crisp edge is going to do, it's basically going to polish or flatten, if you want, like anything that is not creased. So for example, like let's say that I have like a bump on this like surface here like this. If I actually use just normal polish, I kind of get rid of the bump and I get rid of like everything at the same time, which is not good. We want to keep the shape. But if I tell him, don't move my creases, if I use polish crisp edge, it will actually smooth everything that is actually not a crisp edge. Sometimes it will do it too much, and this is where I'm actually going to save a morph target to get back something that I lost. So, for example, if I use, once again, polish crisp edge, I'm going to use it 2 times. It makes for a pretty clean surface, except for like the star. You see like the star, what it does? It kind of like does a bump. This is I'm going to clean later, well, soon. But it's just to show that stars, that's why we try to get rid of like most of them, I'd say. But you see like the before and after, like this line here got actually pretty like flat. So this I like, but I lost my line here that I don't like, and I lost my my little like curve here that I don't like either. So what I'm going to do is after doing that, I'm just going to go over with the morph brush and just like get back like what I lost. So you see like I pretty much like got back what I lost here. But you see, having like not having like a bump from the beginning would just help not having to do like too much polish by polish crisp edge. So you could probably like get to a better result by manually cleaning first and then giving it maybe just one go at it. Store morph target first, get this back, get this back. There we go. So everything I showed so far, if I was not talking, it would have been done in like 2 minutes. So, but the explanation, it takes more time, but you can trust me that it's like, you can go pretty quick with that when you're comfortable with the technique. So the next thing I will do is probably just give it like a little like push, just to make sure that like, because you see like I have like bumps here and here, it's because my mesh is not necessarily like the most flat. So I can probably just give it a last little cleanup like this. And DynaMesh Edition shows me that like it's going to be pretty clean. So the next part is going to make sure I have the edges that I want, because right now they're all super sharp, and it's not something that I necessarily want. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to use the crease level to tell him, hey, you know what? Subdivide, but at a certain point, stop keeping my crisp edges and start smoothing everything. And what is the option? It's in crease. Here you have crease level. Basically, it's at 15 now, so it means I can divide 15 times, and it's never going to smooth my crisp edges. And after at the 16th time, now it's going to smooth it. We're not going to subdivide 16 times. But let's say, for example, I put it at 4. So it means that like if I actually subdivide, I'm just going to use the subdivide of the dynamic subdivision for the moment. If I subdivide at 3, it gets more subdivided, but it's still not crisping my, smoothing my edge. If I smooth it at 4, it's still not doing it, but the next one is going to get smoothed. So 5, now I get like a very tiny smooth here. It's very pinched. How do I make it less pinched? Reducing the crease level to something lower. This is just by experimentation. Let's say 3, you see it got like a little wider. 2, it got like even like rounder. And that might be like too round now. It looks a little bit too like soft, but like maybe at 3, it was round enough so it captures more light when the light passes over the edge. It actually helps with the readability of your edge. And so that would be like a level that I actually appreciate right now. Maybe you want it sharper. I actually like it at that level. So now that I have this, I pretty much have my mesh. It's pretty much like final, like the shape of it. The next step would be to commit the dynamic subdivision into like real subdivisions and start adding like mid details and masks and details like I did in the other example. But one thing that you can do before you actually go to commit your subdivision levels is like have fun with ZModeler. So one thing that I sometimes I'm going to do with my objects before committing to ZModeler is actually going to, committing to subdivision levels is going to use ZModeler. So once again, ZModeler, oops, no, here. And I'm going to use like stuff like to add like edges and extrusions and whatnot. So this is starting to be more experimental. Like you do whatever like looks good. But for me, like my old techniques are like going in like insert, adding like some edges here, and maybe adding like some almost on top one of each other, and then pushing inflate in polyloop mode, pushing this like inside, like this here. So you have like, now you have like a trim detail all over your model. Now it lacks of like creases here, so it's gonna round, but you can always just like crease edge loop, and then now it's sharp. And you can do like the inside also. The reason why I didn't use an inset or an extrusion for that is because inset and extrude will erase creases. Like it will erase the creases of your edges here, and that I don't want. So I figured out that by manually adding my edges myself, it actually helps me to get like this, this little detail here. So you can do this here, and you can even like inflate it like the other way around like this. So now you have like some like external trim detail. You can go to the point of like actually adding even more like this and having like some like go in like this, which adds for intricacy of details and whatnot. And now it's just a matter of like adding your creases again. Like, do you like that it's around like this? If you don't like it, you can go back to like group by angle and see if it like helps you. Group by angle, crease poly group, and then, oh, you see, you got a good result here, like this. So there you go. That actually like, that's like little tricks you can do. And you can really like have fun with those. Like if you don't want one to actually to extrude, you can basically like do things like masking a poly group. So when you're going to use like inflate poly loop, you're actually going to actually keep this from inflating and that sort of stuff. You can do so much things with ZModeler, but this is pretty much like my idea of like something you can do quickly. Something else you can do quickly that's like a trick is like if I want to mimic adding like a rubber pad to like this plate. Let's say it's like a plate that goes like on somebody, and you don't want the metal to hurt the skin. You can add like a rubber pad, and something like a quick trick that I like to do is just use curved tube snap. So curved tube snap lets you like add like tubes like this, but if you actually start to draw it on the edge and press Control, it's actually going to go from one poly group to the other, or one crease to the other. If it stops here, you can simply mask everything but one side and then apply it. So it's going to reappear, and when reappearing, it's also going to have like this like tube thing here. So you can like hide it and split it into another subtool. Like hide, it's the same, in me it's the F key, which is like visibility hide part. And you can now go into split to split it into another subtool. So split, yeah, here, split hidden, and now it became its own subtool here. And oops, I'm just gonna hide everything with this. And now you can give it maybe like the little like curve that maybe like you lost here.
And Mark, I just want to let you know that you're about a little over 2 hours into your stream, just so you know too.
Okay, that's actually good timing because I'm pretty much nearing like the fundamentals, and everything else will be like maybe like over time over the technique. So yeah. Anyways, thanks for letting me know. So now when I will go back to my my dynamic subdivision with my creases. Now I have my mesh here, To get rid of like that line, it's just a stroke line. So you just go in stroke curve function delete. And the other one here, you can also apply a dynamic subdivision, and then you just pull on it until like it kind of like does that rubber padding thing that you need. Like here it needs to like be a little bit more like similar, but you can just do it by hand, whatever. So back to here. Basically, like before I go back to repeating like the mask and the thing that I showed earlier, I just want to show you like the transition to like subdividing, and it's pretty simple. Basically, it's just a matter of in dynamic subdivision, you click apply, and now it becomes real subdivision levels here, and it means that now you can also like draw on it your details and everything. One thing that I want to show is one of the first thing that I do is I just finish something that might be still unpolished, and it has to do a lot with like something that topology was not really helping me to do, or maybe like the stars, like I said, the vertices that creates pinches. When I'm actually back to this here, what I like to do is get rid of those right away. And what I do is I'm simply going to go to like a somewhat low subdivision level where I can kind of like see my pinches. Now it's like a very, very subtle shade of gray, but I still like see it like right here. And what I do to get rid of those, it's really simple. So Paul, you're gonna tell me what's the name of that brush, because I don't know what's the official name. I call it Smooth Relax. It's when you start to smooth and you remove your finger from the smooth button, but you still continue smoothing.
Yeah. It's called the Smart Polish Smooth.
Polish Smooth, which is a good name because it's smart with the topology, and it's going to relax your pinches to actually like make it like an even surface. So what I'm going to do, like I said, I'm not going to do a simple shift like this, which is, first of all, it's really flattening my object. I'm going to click shift, click on the pad or the screen, and right away remove my finger from shift, and now I'm going to move. And it's actually going to keep my shape and remove the pinches. Now, one warning: if your radius touches the exterior, it might do a bumpy thing like this. So if it does that, just hide the exterior. Just hide everything but your plane, and now you're good to go. And you see, I just did a little quick. Okay, I'm gonna try to really like show you the pinches. Okay, now you can see it. You see like the bump here and the bump here? They're because of like those things here. But you see if I do like the shift thing, like they're pretty much gone.
You want to maybe make your poly paint a little bit darker, because it's make your poly paint of the model a little bit darker.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I'll remove the metallicity of the matte cap also, so that it punches the
yeah. Yeah, hot pink was good though too.
Yeah, there you go. Hot pink, perfect. It doesn't hurt the eyes at all.
Yeah, you can see you got two bumps there.
It actually makes me look more tan also.
Yeah.
See, there you go.
Yeah, the reflection from your Cintiq. Yeah.
Exactly. Anyways, so back to this. So you see like the pinch. You see like that's one is like that's a bad one. When you're gonna bake that and put it in subtool and put like a material, like a metal material on it, like that is gonna pop. And that's I'm really critical to get rid of those, especially when I'm using my clean approach, because my clean approach, I'm using it because I know it's an important part. So I really want to be like as clean as I can, and this will go in it. So I will try to get rid of that. But you see with like the smart thing, smart smooth, it's actually getting rid of like pretty much like it instantly. There might be some of it left, but it's really getting rid of like most of what's needed to, once again, sell the illusion. So there you go.
It was made actually specifically for smoothing out points like that. And there is actually, yeah, we made it specifically from when we were doing all the Z sketching, and then you would get abnormal topology, and this regular smooths would create points. So that's when we developed it. There's a strength slider. There's a strength slider for it as well if you want to show them that in the brush palette and smooth modifiers. There's one slider only for that brush as well.
Really?
Yeah, and go to the brush palette so everyone can see it since they're looking at your ZBrush, and go to the smooth brush modifiers at the bottom. Keep going, and then you see that slider says polish strength. That's only for that brush.
Cool. That's nice. I actually did not know that. I didn't really needed it because I really used the pressure of my pen and I got really adept at it. But that's actually pretty good. Cool. Thanks for letting me know. I just want to let you know also that another way that this like alternative smoothing technique is a smoothing brush is actually pretty good. It's for keeping your volumes, because if like your volume is, for example, like a curve like this, if I press shift and I press on it, it's melting. But if I actually use the thing I just said, the alternative smooth, so I press shift, I click on the screen and I get my finger off shift and I use it, you see how like more slowly it's like melting? Well, it's fixing all of the artifacts while doing some very minimal melting to your shape. So it's really good at retaining the shape also. So basically back to this, now my shape is cleaner. I could also maybe take the chance to maybe flatten this a little bit because it got maybe a little bit too curvy. And when I go back to my higher subdivision levels, well, now it's like way cleaner. And like here, I could actually do a little like hand clean pass if I find that it's like not clean enough still. And this would actually be the result of like my pretty much what is like the mesh itself, the final mesh. I just need to add the mid details like I did earlier and the details, and like we would be good to go. So adding mid details will be the exact same thing that I showed like earlier, where you can either use like masks. Say I'm going to use lasso here. You can use this. You can smooth. Like I'm just using smooth and sharpen just because I know it's really good at like smoothing the shape of the mask. And once I'm like this, well, then you can just like push this, oops, like this. So now you have your mid details. You can even like pull it out of the shape a little bit like this if you want to influence the shape. And then a little smooth, orb crack. You can use orb crack if you want to actually like simulate that this would actually be, after all, a separated piece. I'm going to put the intensity higher. Now I'm using shift to do like a quick slash. Whatever, and then you add whatever detail that you need to add to get the result that you want. This I should like make it like its own brush because I don't want to have to like change those options all the time, but whatever, I'm just showing that right now. Same thing as like showing my other technique of like trim front. If I want to do like this kind of like indent like this here. There we go. This, add like a little detail in it. Whatever, like adding alphas and stuff, it's really a question of like design and that sort of stuff. But yeah, you can like add a little lip like here with simply using like the standard brush, just to like accentuate like this and just give it a little bit of like character. One thing that I really like to do is like sometimes like add like lips around like edges, just to give like to accentuate it maybe, or just add some detail if you feel that like it needs like a trim detail or something. But there's like so much little tricks like this that you can do. Basically, the point is that like this is how like I will create like a shape like this here. This hole, I actually accounted it while doing the mesh itself, the ZBrush mesh. If it's a smaller detail that's like this, sometimes I'm just going to push it in with a mask. It's just a matter of like how close it is to the camera. So you see, like for those, I actually did made this like part of the mesh just by making sure that when I do it, my ZBrush mesh, that there's a contour. But sometimes I'm just going to like use a mask and push it in. So this is basically like how I would do this, the same way that I will do pretty much like all the shapes on that guy here. Now this is like super convoluted, but it's basically what I just shown with maybe like a 5% of difference with a little like spice here and there that gets me to like a little extra result. But yeah, basically that would be it. Actually, I'd say for pretty much what is like the main like the meat of what I wanted to show. I'm an open book if people want to stay and ask questions or specific like clarifications. So I would call it done for like the main event, and the rest is like over time.
Yeah, I'm just looking through the questions, see any questions we can ask. Let's see. For posing a character, do you have to do the poses yourself? And when you're posing, are you just using ZBrush to pose, or
100% ZBrush, baby.
yeah.
Everything in ZBrush. Like it's so rare that I'm gonna go outside of like ZBrush. Like I mean, except for sometimes when I want to really have like a simulated cloth, and I want to do it quickly, I'm gonna cut corners, use like Marvelous, like something often like things like scarves or things that are like pretty much like that fell on the character that are not like yeah, I'm gonna use like Marvelous, just get like a quick shape, put it in ZBrush, ZRemesh it, panel loop it, and then just finish it in ZBrush. Like yeah, but like I'm gonna do a lot of like hand sculpting for things that are like often like if there's just like a sleeve, I'm not gonna like do like a sleeve in Marvelous. I'm just gonna like draw it by hand. And this is where like, well, it's good to practice cloth sculpting because you don't want to always rely on a tool to do your result. And by the way, just a little parenthesis here. I find it's really very important to have at least some practice in like human anatomy and like cloth anatomy, because even if you use like scans or like Marvelous, you want to be able to take what the software gives you and make it look good and artistically and well designed, because it's not because it fell according to gravity that it looks good and like appealing. So you're always or often going to need to fix your scans or your cloth, your Marvelous. So I'd say it's really good to practice at a certain reasonable amount the traditional approach to anatomy and the cloth sculpting, actually.
What's your favorite way to assign polygroups? Is it polygroup it now and groups by normals, or are you still just creating a mask and control Wing? What's your way for you applying polygroups? What's the best way you like to do it?
My favorite way of assigning polygroups is basically always starting with a pass of polygroup by normal, polygroup by angle, so that I still get like at least all my 45-degree angle to be different. Already my panel loop is going to give me some, but I'll often do like an angle, and if not, I will add some more by hand, like by simply like using the selection tool by like selecting polygroups and assigning them and playing manually. I'll do that. Yeah, like the same way that like if I'm doing like in an instance I'm doing some ZModeler like cylinder with details, you can use just Alt and just like remove your finger from Alt and pressing on Alt again before removing your pen from the screen, and it's just going to assign a different polygroup. So I use also this one, but it's a lot like of what polygroup gives me, then the group by normal, and pretty much that's it. If I want to crease, often I'm going to use the technique I showed with ZModeler, where I'm going to crease by hand like the edges that I want to stay creased.
And then seeing that you guys as a company, KS Masons, you guys are doing concept, video game pieces, you're doing collectible pieces. What else have you guys been doing? Our first mandate is video games. That's like the thing that like we're the most like known for and the most set up for. But I'd say that like collectibles is like a close second with design also. We were very unfortunate that a lot of like our design contracts never saw the light of day. So most of like our design stuff is stuff that we do for ourselves. I personally do a lot of design for Sideshow. Like they make me design my own characters.
They just tell me like do him, and like I do him in my flavor, and it's one of my I love doing that because I love to have agency over the design of what I'm working for. But most of the time you're working from like concept, so you have to be good at interpreting concept as much as you have to be good at like designing. So often to fill the gaps if the concept is not really clear. But the collectible thing is more something that I actually like do myself. I'd say video game is like 90 to like 95 of like everything that we do because it's just what we've learned. Like we've learned video game, we mastered it, and we took some like sometimes we went like on the side and actually like did other things in collectibles and whatnot. But it's more like something I do for fun because it looks cool and such.
And your techniques aren't really changing much, right, from either one of those clients, whether you're doing a concept.
No, I'd say like maybe the most important thing is if I do something that's going to be printed, I try to make sure that there's like a shape inside my model. Like for example, this guy here, like this is basically the blocking that each time I did like a new piece, I just pushed my blocking inside. Like let's say like once I did like this piece here, I just made sure that like that the remaining that was like here, I just pushed it in. But the fact that I have this at the end, it makes it just much more easier to just like boolean everything into like a watertight model. So this is something I'm going to do especially for printing, but for video games or like any other thing, like this guy here, whoops, called the high-res version. This guy here doesn't really have like an inside. I think if I remove like this plate here, oh no, actually I have one. It's this piece here. But if I did not have it, like I would see the inside of my model, and this you don't want for collectibles, right? Even if it's like there's something on top, you don't know if there's like a little like cavity somewhere that's like hidden that's actually reaching for the inside and creating like a non-watertight cavern, if you want, in the middle.
Okay, Yak, to answer your question, I think what you were looking for, the method he used to add thickness to his mesh was panel loops. He used panel loops to add the thickness in the mesh, and then started using ZModeler to do some other things to it. Tetsu, you're asking a question, alt release. What was that trick? I was probably looking at text. I'm not sure. Did you mention a trick sometime with alt release, Marco, in the last 10 minutes, 5 minutes?
Alt release, well, the smoothing for not losing your volume. It's the smooth thing I was showing. Like for example, like here is going to be a good example. If you smooth without the release, it's going to like kind of like make you melt your shape, right? But if you have it, it actually, you see, I'm pressing super hard on it. It's not losing like the curve and if I use it without the release, it does lose it. So using the alt release, the shift release when smoothing keeps more your shape and also gets rid of like the pinches when you have like stars on your topology.
Okay. Yeah, that was the shift one. I think you were saying you maybe misheard it. Yes, the shift key. And again, there's a separate slider for that in the brush, smooth brush modifiers.
Yeah. Like I just wanted to show because of the question earlier, like this like hood was like done with Marvelous because but that's not how it looked when it came out of Marvelous. It came out like just like really not of that shape. But I just wanted to have like all this like resting cloth already done, and it's super easy to do in Marvelous. It's longer in ZBrush, and since I wanted to like optimize my time, I went for the thing that was maybe easier in Marvelous. But how I posed him, it's in ZBrush. Everything is posed in ZBrush. I will simply use Transpose Master to like just pose it, and I will often I will pose like a blocking of it. Like I decimate my model, I pose it, so it doesn't look good. It's just a crudely decimated model, but it's in place, and I know that like the composition is everything that I need, and then I will pose my final model on top, maybe one arm at a time, one leg at a time, that sort of stuff.
Now they want to know how many polygons total all those are across, because you're showing it.
The usual question.
Yeah.
It's 140 million polys. And I think everything, like it doesn't count your dynamic subdivisions, but I don't think I have any dynamic subdivisions on that guy. This guy is like pretty much like all subdivided because I wanted to have like some grain on the character pretty much everywhere, since it was to be printed later. And before, like, I know that they're going to ask this. This is a displacement map. The grain here, it's just like this model when it came out of like Marvelous. It actually, I still had my poly groups. So like the thickness of this was a poly group. So I simply went in UV Master, UV Unwrap by poly group. I had something super flat, and I was able to just add a displacement map of this kind of like random grain that I needed for, like, it's not a super nice grain, but it's good enough for how close I want the screenshots to be. So, yeah.
Okay, one more question. Do you use thumbnail sketches for creating concepts, or you just develop the shapes as you're moving along inside of ZBrush?
I didn't really have the chance to create that much concepts lately, so I actually have not really used it, but I totally see why it's actually good to use it, because often you're going to actually want to pull your character back to see really like how you read like the major shapes and stuff. And it's something, it's sometimes like I personally, I forget, and I think a lot of people forget to like look at your character from afar to really see how like the proportions are when you're seen from afar. So having like the thumbnail is actually pretty good for just like always keeping like an eye on it, I find.
All right, unfortunately we got to get going. But Marco, I wanted to thank you for spending so much time with us in the stream and sharing all your tips and tricks. Again, this stream is recorded and it will be put up on our YouTube channel, the Pixologic YouTube channel. That'll be there forever. And then also it'll stay on our Twitch channel for as long as the videos are able to be stored on the Twitch server. They don't keep the videos forever, but YouTube does. So you guys will be able to rewatch it as much as you want, over and over and over again. Watch Marco sweat go from the forehead out to the brim. I'm the same way. I'm in the same boat as you.
That's good. Actually, it's been like 2 hours and a half now, right?
Yeah.
So let it be said, this is 2 hours and a half at this mark here. So now we know on the sweat chart.
The sweatometer.
The sweatometer.
So Marco, again, thank you for sharing so much with us and sharing all these tips. This has been part of our ZBrush Master Season 2, where Marco was kind enough to be a part of us. Next week, we'll be having Ben Moreau. So check that one out. That's going to be at 7 p.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time. So again, that's 7 p.m. Los Angeles time, if it makes it easier to grasp it. But you can definitely visit our calendar that I've shared with you guys to get reminders. So I'll put that back in the chat so everyone can have that. Marco, I don't know if you want to put in any last minute words for yourself to the people watching and tuning in.
Oh, well, first of all, this has been really fun. I know I have like verbal diarrhea, so like, but I think I was pretty good at like covering what I wanted to cover. But if like anybody has like questions, they're more than welcome to email me or send me a message. Since I'm about to be a father for the first time, I can't promise I'll be super available, but it will be my pleasure to help you if I can, for sure. If you invite me here again another time, I think I have like other stuff I could maybe show. That would be my pleasure. I love to share. I just have so little time to share, but I do love to do that. So that would be nice. And for myself, I'd say that like if anybody is like interested to work for Chaos Masons, don't hesitate to send your portfolio. We're always like excited to meet new people and add them to the roster or the team if like we have projects and stuff. So don't hesitate. And I'd say that if you have any curiosity about like what we do, you can always visit chaosmasons.com. If you're like a producer or whatever, we're always available for work, or we always like to make ourselves available for work. And I'd say that if you want some merch, like cap or whatever, I just opened the store if like that's interesting for anybody. Your money is probably better spent with the COVID situation right now, but whatever, it's there if you want it. We still have some collectibles that we have available, especially the Daddy figure and the Creep. And we have actually some very interesting projects that are coming about collectibles. We're expanding our line. Unfortunately, this is going a little bit slower than we would want, but that like the world is in a special place right now. But let's say that like keep your eyes open, because we're looking into like expanding our collectible collections and whatnot earlier. This is personally my next passion project, so stay tuned for that also.
Yeah, they're really loving your Mega Man series, by the way. Everyone's been commenting on that as well, how much they love what you've been doing with the Mega Man series.
Thanks. That was really like something that I did like for myself. I knew it was like, oh, it's not that original. It's like something we already know and blah 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 blah. But it's really good to make something for yourself once in a while, and it can really be like a recipe for the white page or blank page syndrome. That's a expression in English, right?
Yeah.
When you have a hard time to start, just do something for yourself. It's much easier that way, I'd say.
Yep. I've also shared the Chaos Masons link inside the chat, everybody, so you can see what Mark was talking about for his company and how to reach out to them. That's in there, and I've also put the calendar link in there for upcoming ZBrush live streams. And again, we got Joseph Druss tomorrow. We got Solomon Blair on Thursday. I myself am going on Friday, continuing my Gremlin project. So by all means, hop on that calendar. There's certain events you guys like to see, and you can actually click on the events and have a email reminder and even add it to your calendars. And if you're a Mac user, the iCals as well. So again, Marco, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day on this Tuesday to be with us. It's been a lot of fun, and it's been great watching you work inside of ZBrush with your techniques for Hardsurface.
All right, that's cool. Well, it's been a pleasure again, and until the next time, I'd say for the moment, just wish me good luck, because in 1 month I'm making a double of myself, so it's going to be something else.
All right, everyone, have a fantastic rest of your day. Really appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you next time on our next ZBrush Masters next Tuesday with Ben Moreau, or we'll see you in any upcoming streams from the Pixologic team. Have a wonderful week. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.